So this is a presentation for you on movement and mobility, looking at physical activity promotion around the time of a diagnosis of dementia. So just as a means of introduction to this, back in 2018, we set up a physiotherapy service here in Swansea for our primary care mental health team. This includes the memory assessment service. Hara, our band 6, is going to be taking you through quite a lot of what we did and will be leading quite a lot of this presentation. But I am delighted that we are able to emphasise the importance of movement and mobility for patients at this time of their life. Patients can now be assessed for and signposted to community exercise projects, but can also access vital physiotherapy if they need it. Details of some of our exercise groups and interventions are found later on in this presentation, and we also have our email addresses on the next slide if you would like to get in touch with us about anything. We think this is a very good model, it's worked well, and it could be a template for other memory assessment services. Even if you don't have direct access to physiotherapy within your team, knowing what to look for and understanding the importance of an active lifestyle and finding out the barriers to keeping mobile is an important start. Here we have our email addresses and our titles if you wish to contact us at any time.
Thank you. In 2021, the All Wales Dementia Care Pathway of Standards were published by Improvement Cymru. Standard 9 was on movement and mobility. It followed people who are living with dementia and their families reporting that they had no access for advice or support or expertise with keeping mobile, keeping moving, until problems arose. And the aim of this standard is to improve the knowledge of staff and the support for people and their families around the time of diagnosis, to help staff feel more confident about having a conversation about the benefits of physical activity. And this session also, as Jackie said, Hara's going to give some examples of options and things that have happened in Swansea to help people promote physical activity. The Standard 9 movement and mobility poster is available from Improvement Cymru. There's links at the end of this presentation. It recommends certain components within the week, but everyone's different. What's really important in recommending or supporting physical activity is it's relevant and enjoyable to the individual, and what one person likes, another dislikes. So we can't prescribe set activities. We have recommended components to discuss and recommend. We know the physical benefits of increasing physical activity is benefits to strength, balance, and reducing the risk of falls. The mental health benefits include improvements in mood and makes us happy, feel happy. And there's well-being examples, well-being benefits, physical activity experienced together, so the person living with dementia and their families or their communities. This seems to foster sort of strength and resilience and improve well-being within that family or community. The next slide shows a physical activity spectrum with sedentary behaviour on one side and fit and being very fully independent and active on the other, and some examples of how people might walk in to memory assessment service or primary care, or what they would look like, and what may be relevant to talk about or recommend. Okay, so we won't go through this exactly, but there's some examples from sedentary to fit. As you can see, we will be hopping from one side to the other because of COVID, so please excuse us while we do our mobility and movement during the presentation. So I'll now hand over to Hara.
So hello, I'm Hara again. So I'm going to walk you through most of the presentation. First thing is that as we get older, as people get older, it's very common to think that we can't do things anymore, and you often hear people say, I can't do this, I'm too old. Indeed, as people do get older, they do lose some of the muscle mass and some of the strength. This is called sarcopenia, and is part of our physiology. It can be made worse or exacerbated by cognitive impairment, but also there are other factors which contribute to it, such as physical illness, loss of confidence, no sedentary lifestyle because of transport or social isolation, basically not doing a lot. A lot of these factors can be reduced, obviously, by keeping active, as we have already said. And there's also, with people getting a diagnosis of dementia or mild cognitive impairment, it tends to be a circle which it becomes worse, whereas people think that's because they've got dementia, or even their families, they've got dementia, they can't do much, and so become this sedentary cycle. So some people, this is a few examples of people with cognitive impairment. They can have some effects such as less ability to do two things together, and this is quite an important thing. This is such as things like walking and talking at the same time. We can see changes in the way they walk, reduce strength and balance, and there can be some very subtle changes, which again, people tend to put them down to age more than anything else and accept them as normal. Not everybody with dementia will go on to develop movement difficulties, but having a diagnosis can put them in a higher risk, and especially if they've got vascular or Lewy body dementia. So it's just being aware rather than expecting it with everybody who's going to have a dementia diagnosis. So during, while you, at the time of diagnosis and assessment, there are some opportunities to pick up some of these issues or some of these problems maybe. Here we're going to look at what can you watch out for, things that you can ask during your assessments, what can you recommend if you do pick up, or even if people are active, there are still things that you can recommend to remain active, and who could you refer to. We're going to start with what can you watch out for. Again, these lists are not exhaustive. There are examples and maybe just a guide that you can look back to if you're not quite sure. And also, I would say just listen to the patient, follow their conversation. Some of the things might come up quite easily. Some of these things you might see them as they're walking into your room, or if you're walking into their house. The very obvious things like they struggling to stand up from a chair, they're not able to walk, maybe they stop to talk while they're walking. This is where we go to say that they can't do two things together. If they come to sit, they're struggling to go around narrow spaces and things like that. So these are just, again, a little guidance of what you could be looking for. What can you ask? Again, an example of questions. The very obvious is, have you had a fall? Or people might volunteer that and say, oh, I've been falling all the time. Another thing is what are they doing at the moment? Because people will tend to say, oh, I'm coping very well. Are they doing activities? Have they got interests? Are they doing the things they used to do before? And you can follow a conversation depending on what they're saying. Are they going out? Why not? Is it transport, which is we'll look at it again. But is it because they can't use public toilets, etc.? So social isolation again, obviously, if they can't go out, if they can't leave the house, if they have communication difficulties, can affect how if they choose to go out and do things. Transport is a major one because, especially with diagnosis, they might have stopped driving. They might not have anybody to take them to places or access the bus and things like that, especially with COVID. So transport can be a big factor, and stopping activities quite early can lead to social isolation and loneliness, and as well as reduced physical activity levels. So I'm going to pass you back on to Andrew.
So as well as the benefits we've already explained about maintaining or increasing physical activity levels, we know that exercise can improve the ability to do dual tasks. So as Hara said, this could be the ability to walk and talk at the same time. This is not just a sort of clinical quirk of interest. It also improves people's ability to cross the road safely, for instance, or use public toilets in crowded pubs, or there are places where dual tasking is important, and that can improve. It can improve people's confidence to start or restart community activities. So once you receive a diagnosis of dementia or mild cognitive impairment, there is a risk you lose confidence. And we know that people who are able to keep active, maintain a high, in general, maintain sort of confidence to maintain community activities, and therefore they may benefit from improved quality of life by having events during the week, so the person and their family may be able to share more activities of any sort. Some will be exercise, but many won't be. But getting to activities in itself is of benefit. As I mentioned before, the Standard 9 recommends components including chat, session with other people, at least one being with other people, being strong, at least one challenges your strength and balance and makes you breathe deeply. So can involve getting short of breath. So it could involve steps, slopes or hills, but depends on the person's fitness. It could involve getting out of the car and walking into a building, may be enough for some people, or others may have to be walking up significant slopes or hills. Okay, we're just going to hand back over to Hara.
Okay, so I'm back. So be aware of the chair. That actually was born from a session with one of the groups, information groups. So basically, as people become older, especially when they retire from their job, they tend to take to the chair, spend more time on the chair, and also the chairs become more elaborate. They become electric, they lift them, they make coffee, they sleep in them. And as a result, they almost never leave the chair, and they become one with their chair. So obviously they become more sedentary, they lose a lot of their ability and a lot of their functions. But the chair is dangerous. So moving on into who you can refer to. This list that we've put together is a lot of it is based on what we've got in Swansea Bay area. Each area will be very different in what they've got available. It might be a lot more things than what we've got, or different, or less. But this is just an idea, because we use community, we use other physiotherapy services, and we use things like the National Exercise Referral Scheme. And again, it depends on the level and the needs of each person. So things that we have used is the navigators, we call them, local area coordinators, that they know what's going on in the community. Like I said, the National Exercise Referral Scheme. We've got Bikeability, which is one of my favorite, and what everybody can use. And one thing to keep in mind is that even if you haven't got a mental health physiotherapy service, most of the physio referrals are likely to go to the community physiotherapy service, and we only get the ones that we would need that specialist input. So again, it's being aware of what is out there. I'm going to move on, and we've got an example from one of the groups that we've run in Swansea. This is an exercise group which then progressed into being an adapted hockey game team, so hockey game sessions. It was 1 hour per week, and it ran as ad hoc to the cognitive stimulation therapy, which was run by the nursing staff. The patients were variable baseline. You had some people that they couldn't stand up from the chair, other people a little bit more independently walking, some people had more cognitive issues, such as following instructions. So we had a variable baseline of patients, and the exercises, although it was a group, the exercises we were trying to tailor to each patient. So it wasn't a massive group, it was a small group of about 6 to 8 people. It was progressive over the 12 weeks. It did include things like dual tasking, and once they became a little bit more steady, then we started playing hockey games. It was fun, and people did enjoy, and we had quite a lot of positive feedback. And one of the things that people said is that they tried things that they never thought they would be able to do before. So what did we have in the group? People showed, so these are some of the improvements that people showed. So a lot of them showed improved mobility. They were able to walk better and move better. You know, the balance scores, because we test as physios, where we had really good tests that people improving. They didn't have falls. So this is, again, is a list of some of the things that these people achieved. Like some of them did manage to achieve to improve the communication skills and how they follow the instructions. So we had a cognitive and a physical improvement. The most important thing, it was the life, because we can do hundreds of tests and show really good scores, but what does that mean for these people? And one of these things is the daily life achievements that they had. And you can see again in a list that is in front, you can see a lot of things like not having, like I said earlier, not having a lot of falls or moving better. But one of the most important things was that 6 couples, because their carers would also come to pick them up, so they all developed really good relationships, and 6 couples developed a social network, and that network provided a lot of support to each other. I've got to say, 2 years later, that I've seen some of these people, they still have this social network and it's still going. So what they did is 3 of these couples would regularly meet up weekly and go cycling in bikeability. Then they would go for meals, but then they started going to other groups like Forget Me Not, and they slowly introduced other friends. So they've created a lovely network which is still going, and they have a nice social life. And these are the little things that they make a big difference to people's life, rather than just saying their balance is great. But what does it mean? This is a photo from our hockey, from one of the games from our hockey team, and then this is from a session from bikeability. So I'll pass you on to Jackie.
Thank you. That's really the end of the bulk of our presentation. We hope you've enjoyed it and it's given you some pointers in part of your assessment, and some things to think about. As Andrew mentioned at the start, everybody is an individual and everybody will respond to different things. After this slide, we have got further resources for you. So we've got links for some of the organisations that we've mentioned, and we've also got some case studies of some of the patients that we've dealt with. Some of them are going back to a slide earlier on in our presentation, which was talking about different categories and whether people are, struggling a little bit at home. So there's a couple of case studies there about different categories, and there's also some case studies and examples of some of the group work that we've done. So I hope you found this presentation useful. So keeping active is not just something that we all aspire to for these patients who are at the time of diagnosis. It's actually essential for them in order to maintain their independence and stay living at home as long as possible. From a physio perspective, we've not been able to tell you everything that we've done and how we set the groups up, so you might want to contact us for a bit more information on that. But our message really is that movement and mobility in this population is really, really important, and maintaining those levels of activity is really important. And a diagnosis of dementia does not and should not stop someone from leading a really active and full life. Hope you've enjoyed the presentation, and thank you.